And we are recording whenever you're ready, Chairman.
Okay, it is 9 o'clock Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. I call this meeting to order. Casey Griffin on our staff will call the roll to establish a quorum. Mr. Griffin. Is Mr. Griffin on? Can someone else?
I don't see Casey on now.
I can pull up the roll call from the meeting minutes if that's helpful.
Okay, Ms. Summers will call the roll.
Give me 2 seconds. Okay, Mr. Cobbins.
Here.
Mr. Dr. Gentile.
Victoria Harpole, designee for Dr. Gentile.
Mr. Jensen.
Here.
Ms. Cobb. Ms. Cobb. Dr. Maxwell.
Here.
Ms. McInturf.
Here.
Mr. Mollenhauer. Mr. Mollenhauer. Mr. Rollins. Wait, Mr. Rollins was with us. Mr. Rollins, are you there?
You're muted, Mr. Rollins.
Yeah, it wouldn't finally let me unmute it. I'm here. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Chair Eby.
Here.
Chair Eby, you have 7 members present.
I declare that a quorum is present and we are duly convened. I would like to ask each board member and each speaker to state their name and position when they request to speak. I will be looking at the raise your hand, and I think Dr. Morrison's going to help me check that. But if for some reason we don't see your hand raised, feel free to speak up as necessary. At this time, I'd like to recognize any members if they have any remarks. If none, Dr. Morrison.
Just glad to see everyone and happy end of summer. I'm sure you're all coming from various locales to join us today. So we appreciate everybody dialing in and to our chair for leading us through the agenda. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you.
It has been a busy summer, and as we go into the beginning of the school year, I know it's continued to be busy. I'm looking forward to our next board meeting when each one of our board members can talk about some of the engagement activities they've been involved in throughout the summer. Again, I want to remind everyone that since we are meeting electronically, ask members to identify themselves when they make motions or seconds, state the motion. Also ask presenters to avoid any unnecessary jargon. One of the main points of this public discussion is to ensure that any Tennessean watching is able to see what we're doing. So with that, we will begin with our first item. That is the consent items. We have 2 items: adoption of the agenda and the TISA Investment Review Committee appointments. Is there a motion to accept the consent items as proposed?
Dr. Maxwell, so move.
Second.
A motion by Ms.
Kelly
Maxwell.
Rollins, second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any discussion? No discussion on the consent items. Then I'll ask Ms. Summers again to call the roll, please.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Dr. Harpole.
Dr. Gentile is non-voting.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Cobb. Dr. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McInturf.
Aye.
Mr. Mollenhauer. Mr. Rollins,
Aye.
Chair Eby.
Aye.
Chair Eby, you have 6 members voting aye.
Then our consent items do pass. Just remember that our board meeting, reason we're doing the roll call is our board meetings policy as well as TCA 844-108 requires all votes taken during electronic meetings to be called by roll. Next item is the consent item on teacher licensure actions. Is there a motion to accept the licensure discipline settlement approvals as presented? I will so move on that. Is there a second?
Second,
State who seconded?
Daryl Cobbins.
Daryl, thank you, sir. You don't show up on my screen. Appreciate that. I will just say that I spoke with Alex Anderson yesterday and I'm satisfied with the actions that we're taking here. So any discussion on this consent item? No discussion. Ms. Summers, would you call the roll again, please?
Mr. Cobbins,
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Cobb, Dr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Ms. McInturf,
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour, Mr. Rollins,
Aye.
Chair Eby.
Aye.
Chair Eby, you have 6 members voting aye.
Motion passes. Next, we'll move on to our items on final reading. First item is repealing the standards for school administrator child care program rules 05201201. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
So moved, Kelly Rollins.
Second, Daryl Cobbins.
Kelly Rollins moves and Daryl Cobbins seconds. Are there any questions or comments on the repeal? No questions or comments. Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Cobbins,
Aye.
Mr. Jensen, Mr. Jensen,
Aye.
Ms. Cobb, Dr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Ms. McInturf,
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour, Mr. Rollins,
Aye.
Chair Eby.
Aye.
Chair Eby, you have 6 members voting aye.
The motion passes. Next item is standards for school administrator child care program rules 05200126. Mr. Chris Whitehead.
Thank you, sir. Chris Whitehead, Director of Early Learning Quality and Supports, Tennessee Department of Education. TCA 491011 through 11109 required that the State Board of Education to promulgate rules for the school administered child care programs. School administered child care programs are child care programs run by public or private schools that provide child care to children ages 6 weeks to 5 years old, as well as programs that provide before and after care programs to school-aged children in grades K through 12. The standards for school administered child care have had minor revisions in the recent years, but the most recent full version was in 2018. This item proposes a comprehensive update to the rules to better align with changes in statute and current best practices to address questions from program directors and teachers. Changes on first reading included, but were not limited to, reclassifying the rules as rules of the State Board rather than under the rules of the Commissioner to align with TCA 49-1-302 I2A. Updating requirements for adult to child ratios and group sizes for specific populations, updating requirements for physical activity, updating requirements for staff training, further revisions to streamline the rules and move reporting and record keeping recommendations to Tennessee Department of Education and created guidance documents. The department has gathered both internal and external stakeholder feedback on these revisions, including input from the department's Child Care Advisory Council. SBE staff held a rulemaking hearing on April 24th, 2026. Public comments were received after the hearing and were shared with board members for their review ahead of this meeting. Between first and final reading, revisions were made to incorporate stakeholder feedback to clarify revisions made on first reading regarding school approval, employee licensure, and program curriculum, clarify requirements for program approval for revocation, clarify staff responsibilities with regard to child supervision and release procedures, review the minimum age for staff employment to consider recent statutory changes, including changes introduced by Chapter 679 and Chapter 873 of the Public Acts of 2026, address grammatical errors and can ensure consistent formatting and style, and ensure defined terms are consistently capitalized when used throughout the rules. TCA 49-1-212 requires that the Tennessee Department of Education prepare a physical analysis of any policy, rule, or regulation proposed to the State Board of Education. This item has no financial impact on an LEA. This item supports the State Board's strategic focus on teachers and leaders outlined in the master plan to ensure all children have access to high-quality environments, adults, and instruction. The Tennessee Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendations. I'll be happy to take any questions.
We have a recommendation from the Department of Education on this item. Standards for School Administrator Child Care Program Rules 05200126. Is there a motion to accept?
Motion to accept, Kathy Cobb.
Moves to accept. Is there a second?
Chrissy McInturf, second.
Ms. McInturf seconds. Are there any questions or comments? I had a couple. I know that we got at least one set of comments submitted as part of the public hearing, and I thought some of the comments were pretty good, and I was just curious how they were handled. Like one of them was that the school day begins at 7:45. Does an adult have to be on premises at 6:45, even though the students of any age are not accepted to 7:15? So how was that addressed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That particular one, it allows that other age groups are mixed in with the 3 to 4 year olds. So for instance, within that hour before and the hour after, the 3 and 4 year olds can be mixed in with the kindergarten and first grade students, of course, minus the infants and toddlers. So that's the way that this rule is worded within what we currently have.
And then the other one says infants will be touched every 15 minutes to check breathing and body temperature, and the information must be recorded. Says if a teacher has 4 sleeping infants, they would be required to log a touch 16 times every hour. They're concerned that would create an administrative burden and distraction for teachers caring for infants. How was that addressed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll be happy to answer. This is really not a new change in the rules that we have. SIDS is such a high risk at this age, and this does not really take an exhaustive amount of time to really ensure the safety during sleeping, which is a high risk time. And I can defer to Chandrea, our general counsel, on that for maybe more information. But as far as the clarification, I believe we clarified some of that within the revision that we created.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? If no questions or comments, I understand Mr. Griffin is back online. So thank you, Ms. Summers, for your support and help. Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Cole.
Aye.
Ms. Cobb. Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McInturf.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour. Mr. Rollins.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I count 7 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Next item is textbook and instructional material waivers request for Bristol City Schools and Knox County Schools. Ms. Brianna Summers.
Good morning, Chair Eby and members. My name is Brianna Summers. I'm the Director of Policy and Academics here at the Tennessee State Board of Education. Before you, I have 2 textbook and instructional material waiver requests. State law charges the State Board of Education to prescribe textbooks and instructional materials as recommended by the Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. However, state law also authorizes the State Board of Education to approve or deny waiver requests for materials that are not on the state approved list. This process is further outlined in our textbook and instructional materials rule. As you know well, the State Board of Education leads math, science, social studies, and ELA standards every 8 years. You heard back about the ELA standards a few months ago at our last regular meeting. In 2023, Tennessee realized that it could be beneficial to move from a 6-year review cycle to an 8-year review cycle for standards in terms of reducing instructional disruptions, saving money for districts, especially for disciplines that aren't, evolving as quickly as some of our other disciplines like CTE and data science. This transition from a 6-year to 8-year cycle had downstream impacts where some standards review cycles were caught in between that 6-year cycle to 8-year cycle, including our 2019 ELA standards review, the last time we did ELA. In collaboration with the department and the textbook commission, we worked with districts to navigate the situation. It was somewhat unprecedented. And before you have a waiver from Bristol City Schools. They would like to use Great Minds, Arts and Letters, language arts, and then they'd also like to supplement with Sounds First, Tennessee Foundational Skills Curriculum Supplement, and Handwriting Without Tears for their grades K-5 ELA instructional materials. Knox County is applying for a waiver to use McGraw-Hill SOAR for grades 9-12 ELA instructional materials. Members, this is a similar waiver request to the one you received back in May from Morgan County Schools. The item attached in your member resources includes directly from the LEA their perspective on their unique or unusual needs as to why they would like to use these alternative materials, as well as other factors that are listed in state law and our rule for your consideration. Based on TDOE expert feedback on standards alignment, other rule criteria, and reviewing multiple state law requirements, State Board staff recommend approval of both of these waivers on first and final reading, and to be effect until the next new ELA textbook implementation cycle, which would be the 2029-2030 school year. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
We have a recommendation for textbook and instructional materials waiver request for Bristol City Schools ELA grades K through 5 and Knox County Schools ELA grades 9 through 12. This is a first and final reading. Is there a motion to accept?
Darrell Cobbins, so moved.
Vice Chair Cobbins moves and Mr. Rollins, I believe, second. Is that right? Yes.
Yes.
Are there any questions for Ms. Summers?
Brianna, I have a question. Those supplemental materials, I assume they've been vetted by the State Department of Ed. I just have a question. Was Wit and Wisdom one of the supplemental materials?
Thank you for your question, Ms. Kolb. We do at the State Board and at the department for any waiver request review any overall materials as well as supplemental materials, particularly because there's the 100% alignment. Wit and Wisdom is currently what Bristol City Schools is using as their approved material. They are applying for a waiver to use Great Minds to replace that as an updated version with some differences in their waiver application.
Thank you.
Other questions? If no questions, then Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll for textbook and instructional materials waiver request for Bristol City and Knox County Schools on first and final reading?
Mr. Cobbins,
Aye.
Mr. Jansen,
Aye.
Ms. Cobb,
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell,
Aye.
Ms. McInturf,
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour, Mr. Rollins,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I have 7 ayes.
Motion passes. Next item is standard setting for science assessments. Dr. David Laird.
Good morning, Chairman Eby, members of the board, state board staff. I'm David Laird. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Assessment, Accountability, and Research, and I'm pleased to present an item for science standard setting and the adoption of science performance level cut scores. In accordance with the Tennessee Academic Standards Review Cycle, the Tennessee Department of Education administers updated assessments for all TCAP science assessments in 25-26. To complete the reporting of test scores for these assessments, it's necessary for the state board to adopt cut scores that will be used to assign students to performance levels. The cut scores recommended by the department are based on the recommendations of Tennessee educator committees that participated in a content-based standard setting process. Standard setting is a qualitative review of content standards with panels of educators who are content area experts. Each panel completes 3 rounds of ratings. During the week of July 13th to the 17th, panels of Tennessee educators convened in Chattanooga to review and recommend cut scores to designate performance levels on these new TCAP science assessments. The attached document provides the department recommended cut scores for these processes. I'm happy to elaborate on the results or the process as needed by the board. The department would simply like to express its incredible gratitude for the teachers that participated in this. We had 66 amazing science educators convene with us in Chattanooga. It is incredibly important and intense work, and the department is enormously grateful for the quality of the process and ultimately the quality of the cut scores that we're recommending. So with that said, the Department of Education recommends approval of this item on first and final read, and state board staff concurs with this recommendation. I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Thank you, Dr. Laird. We have a recommendation for approval of standard setting for science assessments. Is there a motion to accept on
Larry
first and
Jensen.
final? Mr.
Larry
Jensen
Jensen.
moves. Okay, is there a second?
Chrissy McInturf second, and I do have a question too.
Ms. McInturf seconds. Ms. McInturf, the floor is yours.
So I'm curious about timeline. We had quick scores May 21st. Why did we wait until July 13th to have the teacher collaboration and those conversations? I know as a principal, I've been waiting on those scores since June. I mean, the middle of June when all the other ones came out.
No, it's a good question. I appreciate it. And there is a little bit of, there are so many releases. I certainly understand where the question comes from. Quit scores were only available for essentially 3rd grade ELA on May 20th. That is a special process that we devised because of the implementation of the retention law requiring the retake assessment. And so we rushed the scoring of the 3rd grade assessment faster than we can return the scores for the remainder of the scores across the state. So that's one of the reasons why that comes out so early. It is also important to recognize that at the time at which that score is released, and again, we're rushing it to comply with the law, we still have not completed the validation window that districts have. They generally get about 10 days to essentially evaluate the tested performance of their students and confirm the accuracy that the right students received a score. It's not that the score itself would change during that validation window, but the particular use case that we give districts an opportunity to address is, let's say a child completed half a test before they became ill, and that test should have been coded as medically excused. If that code wasn't put in properly, that child would receive a score based on half an assessment. And so we give districts a validation window to clear up any issues like that before scores are finalized. So there's an additional validation window that occurs after that date that districts need to complete. So that delays the official return of scores. Districts received, for all of the tests that were administered in a timely fashion, districts received their scores, I think, on or about June 13th this year. So there's still an additional month between when official scores were completed and when we were actually able to complete the standard setting process. That was largely a scheduling issue for a variety of different folks that caused that additional delay. So it was a combination of trying to figure out the appropriate time where we could get 66 educators to show up and not conflict with the end of school year activities, and a bit of data validation. So happy to elaborate further if that wasn't sufficient.
That's great. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question. Mr. Laird, I don't know if this is a testing company issue or what, but for the last 5, 6, 7 years, our test scores have typically been embargoed. Sometimes October, sometimes November, but yet as a district, we continue to tell our high school seniors that the test scores have an impact on whether or not you get your diploma. And I'm just wondering why it takes so long for these scores to come back. Is it a testing company issue? What is it?
Are you talking about the return of spring scores?
TCAP scores.
So the TCAP scores in the spring, districts do receive those under embargo on or about usually early June. I think it was either, I can't remember if it was the 10th or the 13th this year. They are initially under embargo because we stand up essentially a reporting application, right? We don't get the scores until June 10th. We need to load those into an application and make them available. We give districts a preview window with that application so that districts have an opportunity to review and become familiar with those results before they're made publicly available. But once that application is published, and it usually happens by the end of June or early July, those scores are publicly available. So no one should have to wait to October to see spring test scores. And if that was lost in communication in some way, shape, or form, I apologize for that. That should not be the case. Those are available as soon as we publicly turn on essentially the TCAP dashboard. Scores are no longer under embargo at that time. But I don't want to dismiss the concern about the return of scores. This is something that the department has been working on in a very concerted way over the last few years. We've gotten faster. And we'll be pleased to start discussing this fall some additional solutions that we have in place that will allow us to continue to get faster over the next couple of years.
So this is more or less a district issue if our scores continue to be embargoed and not shared fully until October, November. Is that what you're saying?
Well, and let me just clarify, because I think there may be a nuance here. There are essentially two different releases of scores for TCAP results. There's the standard TCAP release that happens in the summer, and then there's the accountability release that happens later in the year. We realize this is confusing for folks, but there's actually a very strong rationale behind it. People want the scores as fast as humanly possible. They want to know how kids are tested. The summer release of TCAP scores is based on any kid that took the test anywhere in Tennessee. Those scores are publicly available. So the score for a child is absolutely available in the summer. However, when we compute accountability for districts, so now this is the version of the score that's going to be used to hold that district or school or district accountable. There's some additional rules that are applied. And the most consequential rule that gets applied is we call it the 50% rule, which means when we calculate accountability for a school, we only consider kids that were enrolled in that school for at least 50% of the year. Right? Hold people accountable for what they can control. If a child showed up 2 weeks before testing, the school had very little opportunity to impact that child, and we shouldn't hold the school accountable for the score, even if we're going to publish that score in the summer. So there's a later release of accountability data that does happen in the fall, and that's probably, I would guess that may be what you're referring to, and that data is under embargo until the report card is released. The district will have it so they can see and verify and clean up the data, but they can't put that out until the report card is published with the accountability results, and that doesn't happen until later in the fall. So I suspect that may be where I'm getting lost in this conversation.
Okay. It's just a little frustrating because, you know, this semester is almost over before we get a full picture of our scores. So
Yep.
Just a teacher frustration talking here.
Completely understand.
So let me go back to something you just said there, that I understand if a student comes 2 weeks before, that school should not be held accountable. Is the school they came from held accountable for that?
If they were enrolled in that school for 50% of the year, yes, they would be.
Okay. So as long as
For half a year.
as long as any student has been enrolled in a school for 50%, they are accounted in the system, and it's the school that's. Thank you. I had a couple other questions, and maybe last year you explained this. I've slept since then, but it has to do with the process of how you calculate these various scores. And I know you talk about this Angoff method. So these 66 teachers get together, and yes, thank you so much for the time that they spend together. And sometime maybe next year, I'd like to sit in for a day and just watch that process work. If that would be okay. But do they go through and look at the test and say, okay, we think that, 70% of the students ought to be able to get these number of questions right? Or how is that process set? Because I don't think I'm probably the only person that has this question.
No, Chairman Eby, thank you for the question. I'm happy to describe this process, and I'll try to keep it fairly high level, but please push me to elaborate as needed. The important departure point for any scoring of the TCAPS test is to understand that the definition of performance levels are set as a matter of policy. So that's really where the teachers begin the work. The definition of meeting expectations on a TCAP test is that a child has a comprehensive understanding of the standards and a thorough ability to apply it, right? That's what meeting expectations means. And again, that's set in policy. We call that a performance level descriptor, or a PLD. A child with an approaching understanding has an approaching understanding of the content and a partial ability to apply. So when we bring teachers together, we norm them on those expectations of what those performance levels mean, of what the policy PLDs are. We then work with them to refine what we call range performance level descriptors. They essentially take those performance level descriptors, and they translate them into the standards of a course. So if we take a science standard related to the structure of particles, a range PLD, or a version of the performance level descriptor grounded in a course material, might say that a child with a below understanding could, and I quote, use a model to identify the spacing and motion and arrangement of particles in a sample. Right? That's a child with a minimal understanding of the standard. But a child with a comprehensive and thorough understanding of the standard could interpret data or models to explain or predict changes in motion and spacing and the arrangement when temperature changes. And that's all to say the teachers come together. They start with an understanding of what the performance levels mean, and they do the hard work to translate that into the content of their courses. They will then norm on an understanding of essentially 3 model students: the child who's minimally approaching, the child who's minimally meeting expectations, and the child who's minimally exceeding expectations. They will then go through every item on the test, and they'll essentially ask themselves, could the child who's minimally approaching get this item correct? Could the child who's minimally meeting expectations get this item correct? And in that way, they can aggregate a number of items that they would expect the child at the bottom of the band could reasonably be expected to answer correctly. And in that way, they produce a recommended cut score. Now, just to complete the process, we have them do that once, and we identify where maybe there's less disagreement amongst the members of the committee, and we have them discuss. And then we have them do it again, and we have them discuss. We actually have them do 3 rounds of that process. And we do find their thinking refines, the conversation is critically important, but ultimately it's through 3 rounds of that process that we essentially take the median score amongst the groups of teachers that participated, and that's ultimately the recommendation from the committee that comes to the department. So happy to elaborate.
Oh, thank you. That's very, very helpful. I appreciate that. And good. Any other questions for Dr. Laird?
I do, Chrissy.
Yes, Ms. McInturf.
I do want to, I appreciate you taking the time to have those 66 teachers come in and collaborate and have a voice. That is big. And I think I've seen that more and more over the years. So thank you to the department for doing that.
Social studies next summer. So social studies teachers, we need you. Please be ready next summer. Social studies is up next.
And well, like I say, let me know when it is, if possible. I wouldn't mind sitting in on a day and just watching that process, because it seems very involved, but also seems very productive in what you do and how you do it. And that's very helpful.
The invitation stands.
Since you mentioned social studies, is putting TCAP social studies back in place on the horizon anytime soon?
You mean additional grade levels beyond where the middle school grades?
For the elementary?
That was, I'll say that we did hear that come up during one of the legislative assessment task forces. We heard that feedback. I'll also just recognize the department continues to hear a lot of concerns about the amount of testing that we have in Tennessee. And so we do feel like we would need a lot of engagement and conversation about that, because we do want to recognize there's a strong push and a pull. There's folks advocating for that, but there's a lot of folks that I think might express a lot of concern potentially about adding more tests. So it's certainly something that the department has heard.
My concern is it's history. And if we don't put significance and importance on our history of our country and our state and our nation, then significance is not going to be placed on it in the classroom if they know it's not going to be tested. Just comments I've heard.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. Any other questions or comments? If none, we have a recommendation, a motion and a second for standard setting for science assessments on first and final reading. Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McInturf.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Rollins.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Laird. Next item on the list is the 2026-2027 minimum salary schedule. Ms. Mary Ann Dursky.
Thank you, Chairman Eby. And good morning to you, the state board members and staff. I'm Mary Ann Dursky, CFO for the Department of Education, and I'm here this morning to present the state minimum salary schedule for fiscal year 2026-27. TCA 49.3.105E allows the General Assembly to restrict a portion of the annual increase to the base funding for the sole purpose of providing salary increases to existing educators. The fiscal year 2026-27 budget includes $125 million in improvements to the Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement Formula, or TISA, that have been restricted for this purpose. Because TISA is a funding plan and not a spending plan, each district will utilize the additional salary funds to meet its unique compensation needs for existing educators. Districts are not required to provide across-the-board pay increases based solely on seniority or education attainment, but rather have the ability and flexibility to determine areas of need and adjust compensation structures accordingly. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 49.3.306A1, the Commissioner of Education is required to annually present and submit to the State Board of Education for approval a state salary schedule for licensed personnel. The salary schedule must include a base salary for licensed personnel with a bachelor's degree and 0 years of experience. Licensed personnel with more training and experience must receive higher salaries than the established base salary. The minimum salary schedule for 26-27 will include a base salary of $50,000 in comparison with the salary schedule for 25-26, which was $47,000. In accordance with legislation passed during the 2023 session of the General Assembly, the minimum salary for educators has increased to $50,000 for this school year. 100% of the $125 million in improvement for salaries must be spent on improving existing educators' salaries. The salary schedule and any adopted adjustments represent only the minimum salary that a district must pay to individual teachers. Most school districts currently exceed the state minimum identified on the schedule and will continue to do so with the proposed schedule. In 2013, the State Board of Education revised the structure of the state minimum salary schedule to provide additional compensation flexibility to school districts while maintaining a commitment to salary improvements, especially for teachers at or near the state minimum. The proposed 2026-27 schedule continues to address these two policy goals. TCA 49-1-212 requires that the department prepare a fiscal analysis of any policy, rule, or regulation proposed to the State Board of Education. Based on final TISA allocations, it is estimated that 99 districts will be required to increase at least one level of their local salary schedule to comply with the new state minimum salary schedule. For all these districts, their share of the $125 million over each of the past 4 years that was restricted for improving existing educator salaries under TISA provided the necessary funding to meet the required expense. Approximately 9,632 educators will be impacted by the increase to the minimum salary schedule. The increase to the minimum of $50,000 represents a $3,000 increase over the current minimum salary of $47,000. I would like to note that on the attachment provided, there is one change that we will make. We received some information regarding Jefferson County following our submission of this document to the state board. The revision reduces the cost of the increase to Jefferson County to $631,565 and affects 184 educators in that school district. This revised attachment has been provided to the state board and will be provided to members and will be published on the website. Districts may use the balance of any restricted salary funds together with other state and local funds to further improve educator salaries. The amounts shown on the schedule attached are only the amounts needed to meet the new minimum salary schedule. This item supports the state board's strategic focus on teachers and leaders outlined in the master plan by highlighting Tennessee's commitment to increasing educator salaries. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on first and final reading. The State Board of Education staff concurs with this recommendation. I am now happy to take any questions that you may have.
We have a motion for 2026, we have a recommendation for 2026-2027 minimum salary schedule on first and final reading with an adjustment to Jefferson County. Is there a motion to accept with that adjustment?
So move.
Ms. Cobb moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mullenhour seconds. Are there any questions for Ms. Dursky?
Ms. Dursky, I just have some things for clarification, make sure I understand. So each district, will they submit their plan to the State Department as to how they're going to cover those salaries that are not up to par yet?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, each district submits their salary schedule to us every year. Those are then published on our website. Those salary schedules will be reviewed to make sure that they do meet the new minimums. The other piece that we do to monitor this is that we ask districts to complete a salary survey every year. We have just sent out the salary survey on last year's salary increases, and we ask them to discuss or to show us how they use their share of the $125 million to improve their educators' salaries.
Okay, then my next question is, in looking over the attachment, there are some school districts that are going to take quite a hit in trying to bring their salary schedule up to par. What happens if the funds they just don't have enough money to cover those required improvements in salary?
In the event that the new instructional salary funds are not sufficient, they have the option to use other state and local funds. However, our analysis shows that over the past 4 years, there has been an addition of $125 million each year to support this move of getting the base salary for bachelor's and zero to $50,000. And those funds have been sufficient per our analysis to cover the cost of that. Any additional increases could be used, could use state and other state and local funds or some of these other salary funds.
And one last question. I probably already know the answer to this, but those of us who are really old, I'm not going to say old, seasoned teachers who've been around for quite some time, I noticed the salary schedule doesn't quite fit my description. Is that up to the districts, those of us who've been in the district longer than 30 plus years, to compensate us somehow for a salary increase?
Yes, that's a very good question. And yes, that is a local decision. The state minimum is really that. It's the minimum salaries that teachers at bachelor's and certain number of years experience, and then those with advanced degrees and certain years of experience must be paid. Districts have flexibility to adjust salaries for other teachers however they see fit. Those are local decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Dursky? Again, I'm really glad and thank the state for continuing to raise this minimum over the last several years. And I hope they don't stop at 50,000. I mean, I think we value our teachers. We should value our teachers. I know a big announcement was just made this past week about Tennessee being a nuclear campus state likely, and maybe $50 billion coming into the state over the next 10 years. I don't know how we're going to educate these people if we don't have good quality teachers. So please keep it up, the state. Any other questions or comments? If none, we have a motion and a second for 2026-2027 minimum salary schedule. Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Cobbin.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McInturf.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Rawlings.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you. That completes all of the items that we had listed. Are there any further final comments before we adjourn the special called meeting? Thank you for each of the board members for participating. Thank you for TDOE providing the information. Look forward to seeing everyone at our next event. Purposes of the special called meeting have been fulfilled. I declare the board adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.